The Mongol Empire suddenly appeared in the 13th century AD, but disappeared shortly afterwards. The Mongol army was notorious for being cruel, refusing to surrender and mercilessly taking the lives of its enemies. The Mongol Empire invaded Goryeo on the Korean peninsula to the east and conquered the Byzantine Empire to the west, the current Turkic region, and most of Eastern Europe, establishing a huge empire.
After Genghis Khan died, his descendants managed the empirate in their own way, but it declined very quickly. There are several reasons for the decline of the Mongol Empire. One reason is that the empire was too large and diverse to be ruled effectively. The Mongols had conquered a vast territory that stretched from China to Eastern Europe, and it was difficult to maintain control over such a large and diverse empire.
Another reason for the decline of the Mongol Empire is that the Mongols were unable to adapt to the changing political and economic conditions of the time. The Mongols were a nomadic people, and they were not used to ruling over settled populations. As the Mongol Empire expanded, the Mongols were forced to adapt to new conditions, but they were unable to do so effectively. Finally, the Mongol Empire was weakened by internal conflicts and rebellions. The Mongols were a diverse group of people, and they often fought among themselves. This internal conflict weakened the empire and made it more vulnerable to attack. The Mongol Empire collapsed in the 14th century AD. After the collapse of the empire, the Mongols returned to their nomadic roots and split into several different tribes. The age of exploration finally began in the 15th century. As the Ottoman Empire grew stronger and took control of trade routes, it became difficult for Europe to interact with China and India. The Ottoman Empire was a major power from the 14th to the 20th centuries. It controlled the vast territory that stretched from the Balkans to North Africa to Arabia. The Ottoman Empire also controlled the major trade routes between Europe and Asia. The Ottomans imposed high tariffs on European goods, and they often made it difficult for European merchants to travel through their territory. Fortunately, Spain and Portugal were able to pioneer a new route in this difficult situation. At first, they sailed to the southwest of the African continent and pioneered a route that allowed exchanges with India and Japan, one of the Asian countries. And luckily, Spain reached the Americas, not the land they had originally intended to explore. So Spain and Portugal gradually occupied what is now Central America. With this colonization, European-centered world history began in earnest, and trade in the form of exploitation began. Spain and Portugal invaded the American continent and fought wars to occupy the land, but the two countries avoided fighting each other and were able to effectively occupy the land. They requested the Pope's intervention and signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, which stated that Portugal could occupy Africa and Spain could occupy America. As a result, Even now, when you go to Brazil, Brazilians speak Portuguese, while the rest of the continent speaks Spanish. According to the dividing line of the Treaty of Tordesillas, Brazil was included Portuguese territory rather than Spanish territory, so Brazil became a Portuguese colony. From the 18th century, Europe began to develop at an extremely rapid pace. European powers such as England, France, and Spain began building colonies in the Americas in earnest. Establishing a colony brought enormous wealth and rise to the home country and formed the basis for creating more colonies. Meanwhile, in the 18th century, numerous events occurred simultaneously, including the American Declaration of Independence, 1776, and the French Revolution, 1789, resulting in tremendous civilizational progress. As civilization developed, the Industrial Revolution made it possible to mass-produce weapons, and the concept of investment began with the development of capitalism.
Therefore, Europe became an advanced country faster than other regions, and in the 20th century, European countries began to fight among themselves for colonies. The European scramble for Africa in the late 19th century led to the drawing of artificial borders within the continent, regardless of the characteristics of the people. This resulted in many sad histories, including ethnic conflicts, displacement of people, and instability. The artificial borders established by European powers in their scramble for African colonies became the cause of conflicts and border disputes between tribes in African countries that continue to this day. In the 20th century AD, the war for colonies intensified, ultimately leading to World War I, 1914 to 1918. No scholar would argue with the fact that World War I was caused by human greed. Portugal opened the age of exploration. Spain also participated. England and the Netherlands joined forces to defeat Spain, and the Netherlands gained independence from Spain.
At the end of the 17th century, England became the dominant economic and political power in Europe. The Netherlands' influence declined, and France emerged as a latecomer and succeeded. Germany and Italy were relatively latecomers in the scramble for colonies. They were both divided into many smaller states until the late 19th century. Germany was unified in 1871, and Italy was unified in 1861. After unification, both countries began to expand their empires in Africa and Asia. By the time Germany and Italy were unified in the late 19th century, most of the desirable colonies around the world had already been occupied by Britain, France, and Spain. This advantage was due to the fact that these three countries had been involved in colonialism for centuries. Germany's request for colonies occupied by Britain, France, and Spain was rejected, and this was one of the factors that led to World War I. After Germany was unified in the late 19th century, it sought to solidify its status as a great power through colonial expansion. Germany sought to secure colonies, especially in Africa. However, at that time, Africa was already colonized by European powers such as Britain, France, and Spain.
Germany was dissatisfied with the colonial rule of these European powers and demanded colonial redistribution. Germany started war in 1914 following the assassination of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Sarajevo. Through this war, Germany attempted to challenge the colonial rule of European powers and enforce its colonial demands. Of course, various factors other than Germany's colonial leads played a role in the outbreak of World War I. The arms race between European powers changes its balance of power, and heightened international tensions were also causes of the war. But Germany's colonial demands combined with these factors to make war inevitable. World War I broke out and Russia also participated, and in the meantime, the Communist Revolution 1917 occurred in Russia. So Russia was in turmoil due to an internal ideological war. At that time, Britain was occupying colonies in many countries, in Africa, Canada, Australia, India, and so on. Soon after, World War II, from 1939 to 1945, broke out. World War II shaped the world we are experiencing today to some extent. The war led to the deaths of over 70 million people and the destruction of entire cities. It also led to the rise of the Cold War, which divided the world into two rival blocs, the United States and its allies on one side, and the Soviet Union and its allies on the other. The Cold War had a profound impact on the world, shaping everything from the global economy to the development of new technologies. It also led to a number of proxy wars around the world, including the Korean War and the Vietnam War. The war also led to the creation of the United Nations, which was established to prevent future wars and to promote peace and security around the world. In Russia, the Soviet Union was born after a successful communist revolution, and the Russian dynasty and empire collapsed. As Japan invaded the Korean peninsula and Manchuria and began to occupy the eastern part of China, China faced a huge crisis. China was in a difficult situation with the Kuomintang and the Communist Party fighting. The National Party pursued liberal democracy based on capitalism and market economy. The Communist Party pursued communism based on socialism and a planned economy. The conflict between the two powers became increasingly severe, and a full-scale civil war broke out in 1946.
The Civil War continued for 3 years, ultimately ending with the Communists' victory in 1949. With the advent of Hitler, Germany became a threat to the entire European region. So, Japan in Asia and Germany in Europe began to exert strong influence, and in this situation, the United States, a powerful country that was the hope for all mankind, emerged.
At that time, the United States was already growing into a powerful country, but as wars continued to break out in Europe, the United States was enjoying selling war materials and weapons to make a profit.
Meanwhile, repeated provocations, such as German U-boats attacking American merchant ships and Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in the Pacific, eventually led the United States to enter the war.
So, through the war, the United States gained powerful influence by eliminating Japan and Germany, and the Soviet Union also added its power, creating a world centered on the United States and the Soviet Union.
After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union became superpowers and entered the Cold War. There will be a continuation of the story about the two superpowers and the Cold War in a third part. Thank you for watching the video, The Long History of the Human Race, Part 2, provided by History and Current Events. Gina, Bella, Cindy, Helena, and Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.